Lakeland PBS presents Common Ground, brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Production funding of Common Ground is made possible in part by First National Bank Bemidji, continuing their second century of service to the community. Member FDIC. Welcome to Common Ground. I'm producer-director Scott Knudsen. On this episode, Keila McCracken explores sustainable cloth on her Hattersley loom.
Hi, I'm Keila McCracken, and I'm the owner and operator of Bear Cloth. In 2015, I was able to acquire a Hattersley loom, and I'm a magic fabric weaver. Yeah, so this is a good example of what can go wrong. So right here on the loom, what has officially happened is there's this back beam back here, and this basically organizes the thread as it comes forward. It got pushed out. And so the shuttle that goes back and forth follows that beam, and so if this gets pushed out, then the shuttle doesn't land in the little hole, the little nest that throws it back out. So we have the shuttle here that got stuck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take apart a couple pieces and put this back, reposition it. In late 2015 was when the loom arrived, and I had it at a location that was really set up for me to explore and understand the Hattersley loom. So this was my first time working on it, and it was my first time learning about it and working with it. After graduating high school here in Bemidji, Minnesota, I moved to New York City to study fashion design, and went to Fashion Institute of Technology, and was really inspired, and I just had the bug to design clothes to make clothes and to just explore design and an applied medium on the human body. So I was so intrigued, and I just soaked up the education when I was there, and asked a lot of questions that there weren't a lot of answers to at the time. And I also asked questions that I didn't realize at the time were taboo questions, where the fashion industry really didn't want to address certain things. So asking questions of like, who is going to be making the clothing that I design? I wanted to know where these garments were going to be made. I was really curious. I wanted to know who were the people that were going to be spending time cutting out these patterns, sewing the patterns together, doing the pressing and finishing. I wanted to know what the impacts were and what those people's livelihoods were like. For me, design is a really personal process, and so I want to know the people that I'm designing with. So if, I was working with a factory group, I wanted to be able to know what their lives were like. I wanted to know the people, because to me that's important, because it's my work, it's my design, and it's very personal, and so I want to know what their lives are like too, and I want to know them. We dove a lot into textile production as well. And I was asking questions like, oh, what kind of dyes do you use? Are any of them natural? What are the chemical processes for creating these dyes? And what are the environmental impacts? I didn't know that those were charged questions at the time, and a lot of people in the industry at the time didn't have answers for those, and those weren't questions that had come up or that were commonly asked. So I left the fashion industry and dove into anthropology, where I got to ask literally any question I wanted to under the sun, and was also given the time to explore those questions and explore those answers, and based off those answers, ask more questions and do more exploration. So at that time in my life, I knew that I loved textiles, I loved designing, I loved sewing and draping and pattern making, but I wanted to do all of that design work in a way that matched my values. So I graduated with my anthropology degree, and that summer my family, to kind of commemorate my grandparents' passing, we decided to do a trip to Scotland to learn more about our family last name. We all don't have the same biology makeup, but we all share the same last name, so we went to Scotland just to kind of explore that. Less than 24 hours we were in Scotland, and we happened to meet several Hattersley weavers at a church, and during social hour they invited us over to their homes for us to see the looms. And how my parents tell it is that we instantly walked in and saw Hattersley loom for the first time. I had no idea that these looms existed, and my parents say that they saw it in my eyes, that it was just obvious that, like, oh no, Keila had an idea. So it didn't hit me at the time. They knew it, I didn't. But after seeing the looms and how they operated and how they worked, it was something where I was like, oh, this so aligns with my creation and my way of doing things. What if I made my own fabric? Because that summer previously I had tried to weave fabric for myself so I could just like make my own garment. And I did it on a traditional floor loom, and it took me 10 hours to weave 2 yards. And I just knew there wasn't a way that this would work out. I didn't have the patience, first of all, to take 10 hours just to weave 2 yards and not even have enough fabric to make a garment. And so running into the Hattersley loom aligned with the sustainability, the cultural side of things, the history side of things, the production, and it just made sense. At the time, it was 100% gut reaction. I knew that I wanted a Hattersley loom and that I'd work on it and it would all work out. I'd never worked on one before, and when we got home from Scotland, I just started the process of researching Hattersley looms, seeing if they're available, how to even acquire one. And then about 6 months later, it was official that I was buying one, and I had tickets booked to go back to London to be trained on one. And I started my Kickstarter to help me kind of fund the purchase and the process of getting a Hattersley loom. So the Hattersley loom has a really steep learning curve. For those of us here in the United States and within our continent, we don't have a lot of looms that still exist that are parallel for me, where I could just learn off of them. So working with the loom, it was really tough at first, and it was really messy, and it was really frustrating. There are so many moving parts, and what's interesting about the loom is that there's some parts that are kind of like a switch. So it's yes or no. It's kind of like coding, where it's on or it's off. And because of that, that means that either it's working or it's not, and that's that. So learning what things on the loom are yes, no, it's working, or yes, it's working, no, it's not good enough. How do I fix it? There's other parts of the loom that there is kind of a really meshy tipping point of whether it's working or not. So it's more flexible, it's more malleable, and learning those idiosyncrasies of how do I know if it's on a tipping point of it's leaning towards, hey, that's working a little bit smoothly, leaning towards, no, that's not working as well, and then eventually there's the tipping point where it's not working at all, and eventually there's the tipping point where it's perfect. What has been interesting for me to learn is I kind of think of the loom in my head as sections. So there's the sections of the loom that are to my right, to my left, underneath, the cams, the back, and then the upper backs are also their own section. And throughout learning this loom, I've had to learn each section. So every single piece that is tied to a section, I need to know how they are in relation with each other. And then I have to understand how all the sections affect each other. And at first, when I started working with the loom, I was able to make the connections of the larger sections. I could see how the tension in the back was tied to the tension in the front. I could see how the reed was section that was tied to the momentum and the shed. So I was able to identify the larger connections, but throughout a lot of problems and throughout a lot of test runs, throughout a lot of studying, and throughout a lot of stepping away from the loom and just kind of processing and quizzing myself in the head for what the parts do, that's how I have been able to hone my understanding of each individual section. All right, so since this is happening over and over and over again, I think I have something wrong with the take-up of the loom coming forward. So I think I'm gonna try to add there could be something wrong with this lever, so I might add more weights or something like that and goof around over there. Once you realize something is wrong, the thing that makes you realize that it's wrong isn't actually what's wrong, but it's like 4 things down the line that is affecting that thing that you're finally noticing is off. And so when something goes wrong, don't immediately go to what's making like the loudest noise or doing the most visually weird thing. You kind of have to just go backwards and follow the chain of connections and links to kind of figure out what the real problem is. If one thing is off, it could also mean that 5 things are off. It could also mean that 20 things are off. So with my work of learning this loom, I've had to learn that, oh, I instantly have an idea of 5 things I can go and check. So I go check those 5 things. If it is still wrong, then that's when I realize, oh, I haven't learned this part yet. Now I gotta figure out what it is, which is exciting, but also can get really frustrating because I have no idea where to go. And so that's where the experimenting comes in, that's where the research comes in, that's when it happens where I have to phone a friend and phone another Hattersley weaver. But it has taken a long time for me to be able to really learn it and work with this loom. It hasn't always been easy. There's a lot of literal blood, sweat, and tears in learning the loom and the process. And so that's why when it is running smoothly, when you can really hear it, when I can feel it, and when I can see it, it's a completely different feeling on the loom when it's running than when it's not. Yeah, so even if something very minimal is wrong with the loom, it can affect the fabric. And so the sooner that I'm able to catch something, the better. And I do have a little bit of a leeway if I catch it on time to kind of make it so you can't tell that I made a mistake. And one example of that is, so with every throw of the shuttle going back and forth, that's a pick. And if I catch the mistake on the exact same time that like the pick is being thrown, so if a mistake happens and the pick is being thrown, if I catch the mistake before the next pick is thrown, then odds are you won't notice any change in the fabric. But if it takes me 1 or 2 picks to stop the loom or 3 picks to even notice what's going on before I realize something's happening, then there will be an effect on the fabric. First, I want to highlight when I'm operating the loom, there's 2 different feelings that I have when I'm operating it. It's either the most serene, easygoing, relaxing, confident boosting, like I got this, everything is fine feeling, and it's beautiful and it's like an instrument and everything is harmonious. The other times when I weave, if something is off, it is the biggest adrenaline rush and everything is about to go wrong. And I don't know, and I just have to wait to see for the loom to give me more information, because when something goes wrong, it's giving me information. So when things are going off, I'm always kind of in peaked like fight or flight mode of paying attention, high tension, high stress. I have to be on alert so that I can understand what is happening so I can fix it. All right, so there's, right now on the fabric, you can see that there's a couple mistakes. And there's kind of 2 ways of seeing that in this situation. The first is there's a little bit of a gap in the fabric, and that's where I was actually pulling the fabric forward to compensate for the uptake not being the right speed. The second thing is you'll actually see that there are certain threads that are going over and under when they're not supposed to be, and so that's because I missed about 3 different picks. So it's not the exact same pattern. So there's actually kind of, the pattern is not correct in this situation because, so for example, if I have to throw 1, 2, 3, and 4, in this situation I missed 1, 2, and 3. So it basically went 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, because I'm missing 1, 2, and 3 in that sequence in the pattern. So when the loom is going smoothly and I'm sitting behind the loom, it is very much a relationship. I am receiving a lot of information from the loom from just sitting there and pedaling. And pedaling, oftentimes when people see the loom and they get really excited and they want to sit behind it, they want to just push the pedals and push the power. And what happens is they end up flying backwards because there's a lot of oomph behind the loom. And so you have to learn when to kind of give and when to kind of push the loom and hold it in place. So when you're working with the loom, just with how the feeling is when you are pushing the pedals, I can tell and sense if the shed of the loom, and the shed is where the shuttle goes back and forth between the threads, if that's getting narrow and is too narrow, or if the shuttle is a little delayed or early, I can feel that in the pedals. And that's something where it allows me to be more in tune. So I've been able to learn with my eyes, and I've been able to learn with my ears of understanding when it's working or not. Now primarily I just use my ears and my feet to understand if it's working and if it's not. If something goes wrong, I can feel it in the pedals first and I can hear it first, and I will find out maybe a few picks later, a few like pedals later, I'll be able to see that something is wrong. So usually I'm feeling it and I'm hearing it first. And that's a way for me to, with the feeling, I can usually stop right at that second. And so catch it before something goes wrong. With the hearing, I might be able to catch it maybe one pick too late. With seeing, it's already too late by the time I notice that something went wrong. So it's very smooth and energetic and a really empowering feeling when everything's going great. And when it goes wrong, I mean, for anyone that loves an adrenaline rush, this is definitely the thing for you if you're into adrenaline rushes that are tied to looms and making fabric. So it can be a little intense and stressful, which also has its own fun tied to it as well. I now have my own working studio in Turtle River, and it's a small studio that I converted and have been kind of creating very deliberately as a makerspace. So a local artist of mine, when they found out that I was looking for a permanent location for my loom, pulled me aside at an art show and was very deliberate to outline that as a maker, as a creator, as an artist, you need to have your own makerspace that feeds your creativity, that you're able to walk in with energy ready to go, and the space doesn't eliminate that or minimize it, that it's able to feed your energy and keep your energy so that you create, because that will show in the end product. So I really love my makerspace. It is one of my favorite places to be in the world. Right now it feels really good because I feel like I have acquired enough skills to know what I want the outcome to be, and I'm able to literally create that. And it feels so great to have that skill set and to also have that kind of imagination of, I want this to be reality, because in my head it's reality, and then to be able to make it reality for other people to see the creations is amazing. So currently how I do production is I do what's called batches. And so a batch represents the warp that's on a loom. And so for warping right now, I can do anywhere between 30 to 100 yards at a time for putting on the loom. And whatever comes off of that warp is considered a batch. And what that means is anyone that has the same batch number as you guys are cut from the same cloth, literally. So they came from the same warp. And so I do a lot of scarves and shawls and tote bags. And what I'm really excited for right now is I've finally been able to capture and create the type of textures and structure that I want from fabric to work with to construct clothing. It's taken a long time to get to this point because it really is honing in not only what thread I want to work with, but also the warp, what structure weave I want to do, and then off the loom finalizing the fabric with doing fulling and washing and pressing so that the fabric is ready and what I want it to be to actually work with for constructing garments. I have a few patterns that I've been working with. So I have the Woods Woman shirt, and then I have a blazer that I'm currently working on and customizing, just so I can start understanding what it's like to work with my fabric on a sewing machine, because I do have a few custom orders for textiles and for fabric. And before I send it out to those people, I want to make sure that it works for sewing. So I'm at that stage, which I'm really excited to be at. When I am looking at different places to source my wool and the yarn, I'm looking at those places with the same lens that I'm looking at my own production. So I'm paying attention to their environmental impacts. I'm paying attention to the economic impacts of where it's being made, how much their workers are being paid, and where they are geographically in the world, and what is the economic system. Because some places they need that influx of industry and business, and some places need to have it kind of reduced and have a different relationship with that industry. So I am paying attention to those things when I am sourcing the wool. It's incredibly important to me that my products, whether it's a scarf or whether it's a blazer, that when its life is done, when it's done being used and worn and repaired and loved, that it can return to the natural environment in not only the fastest way possible, but a way that sustains the natural environment, and that those resources that are caught up in those natural materials, that they can re-enter the natural ecosystem in a way that they can be replenished and used as fast as possible. What I think is especially beautiful about being able to work with the Hattersley loom and work with the product that comes off of it is it has a different energy than what I have really struggled to find in terms of clothes that work for me in my life. There's a different feeling, quite literally and figuratively, in wearing something that has been made by a human and that has been intentionally made by someone. Because, for example, clothing is still one of the few industries worldwide that still depends on human labor. What is a downfall of the industry is that the cost for human labor is the first thing that is deducted when they're trying to make cuts and make things more affordable. So that the people that are being paid, their paychecks are being reduced because that's a flexible thing that the owner can make, and they can make that decision. Whereas something like materials or equipment, those have set costs, and so those cannot be reduced. And that's why within the fashion industry, there are a lot of people that are making handmade clothes. Most clothes are already handmade, but the people that are making those clothes, they're not being able to really have a livable wage. They're not able to live a life of quality and well-being, which means that for us as consumers, it falls on us. It's our responsibility to either locate places in the industry that we know that people are being treated well and are paid fairly, or it means that, and I believe it's more so of a this and this instead of a this or this. But what I think we should do is be looking for places that we can purchase goods that meet our values already, and then support those industry workers throughout the world that their labor is being cut because they are not being valued as much, and the people that hire them know that they can find someone else to step in and take their place at a cheaper, lower price. So what that means for me for production is this transparency and honesty of I'm trying to create something very specifically for you that holds the quality, holds the energy, holds the importance and the value of what I think is important. It's a very different feeling wearing a garment that was made in an industry that isn't designed for you, that the designer didn't think of you while it was happening, that they weren't maybe thinking of your lifestyle when it was being designed and constructed, that the colorways don't really work for your lifestyle or your wardrobe and you don't feel super empowered when you wear them, but it's what was there. And then there's this feeling of when you put on a garment that you chose the color because you love wearing that color. And you get to choose the weight of the fabric because there is fabric that can be too heavy and too light for your body and what you like to wear. So finding the Goldilocks of the weight of the fabric. And then finding a weave that you really like, that it feels good, it feels cool, and it matches who you are. All right, so that's just the production of the fabric. And then you have the creation of the garment for you, or the creation of the product for you and what you like. So whether that's a shawl that's a few inches longer so that it kind of works like a blanket, or whether it's a scarf that's a little bit shorter so that it works with how you like to wear it. Those are minor adjustments that work with your lifestyle and with you, the wearer, the person that is going to be wearing this garment. When garments are created, and the wearer that owns them isn't able to really feel like themselves in them, and they're really not able to express themselves, and they're constantly needing to adjust it, and they just feel like something's a little off, it also shows in how that person interacts. when something is just a little bit off, it shows from that person. So when you have a garment where you chose the color, you chose the weight of the fabric, it is custom made to you and your ease, right? And the ease is what is the movement style of the garment. So maybe you like a lot of ease and you want it to be a little bit farther away from the body, or maybe you like it to be a little bit tighter and really tailored to you. Everyone has a different amount of ease that they feel comfortable in and moving in. If you're someone that likes to use your hands, you know, cutting the arm's eye so that it works better for that. It's a completely different feeling to have a garment that embodies you and your energy than a garment that was made with an idea of, okay, so roughly this type of person will purchase that. I want people to feel incredibly special, and I want them to feel that on a day-to-day basis. You wear clothes every single day. Why not put on clothing on your body? Why not wrap yourself in a shawl or a scarf in something that makes you feel more like you? And so being able to do what I do at a smaller production level, where I get to choose the color based off of the person, or they get to choose the color and we get to work on the cut together, it really creates a garment that then someone can really turn to and they get so excited to wear it. And I want people to be excited for their day, to have more and more moments where they feel like themselves, to feel like they have energy, to feel like they're excited and kind of ready to show off. I want people to feel that more and more. And so being able to do something as simple as create a really nice scarf or a shawl or a blazer or a shirt or a backpack that is custom for that person, I want to be that person that can do that for someone. I invite you to check out the Bear Cloth website, which is BARECLOTH.co. And there's a few good things to check out on the website. So I do have merchandise that I sell there that you can check out kind of what's off the loom, what's already been made, and select what you like. Or else you can also do a custom bespoke order and kind of do something just for you as well.
Thank you so much for watching. Join us again next week on Common Ground. If you have an idea for Common Ground in North Central Minnesota, email us at legacy@lptv.org or call 218-333-3014. To watch Common Ground online, visit lptv.org and click Local Shows. Episodes or segments of Common Ground, call 218-333-3020. Production funding of Common Ground was made possible in part by First National Bank Bemidji, continuing their second century of service to the community. Member FDIC. Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money by the vote of the people November 4th, 2008. If you watch Common Ground online, consider becoming a member or making a donation at lptv.org.